Hey guys, today we're going to tell you about Albion Online. This is a completely different Albion from the others, especially because in this one we'll meet a protagonist with a completely different pet foot from the others, because this one will be Godzilla as his pet. But to understand everything, how he got this pet foot, we need to go back to the beginning, here in a classroom. Then we see all the chaos happening while a poster says that on a certain special day it will happen. But among these students who were all messing around in the classroom, one ends up waking up. He wonders if he really managed to come back. Coming back before the entrance exam, knowing this then, he ends up waking up completely scared by this. While all the students there are scared of our protagonist because they see that he suddenly went crazy, and so, then, he holds his head. And only later wonders what kind of horror story this was. If he had kind of reincarnated, at least it would be at the moment after he managed to get into college. So he begins to tell a story, because since ancient times, humanity in the Blue Star has been tormented by some kind of catastrophe. Invasions perhaps by powerful monsters like these monsters here that we can see. But the Secret Kingdom connects with other worlds, and these many are full of these scary monsters. Sometimes they take advantage of the rift that opened between their kingdom and ours. They will be invading the human world. The powerful monsters can be destroying several nations and totally threatening human civilization. Knowing that they were losing the fight against these monsters, humans ended up creating something there. What they created or developed was basically the beast gene system. What it means is that simply you will inject beast genes to be able to awaken the monster model and unlock the genetic talent within, which only with this brings powerful warriors can be saving human civilization. This also makes the warriors enjoy their status and treatment much greater than ordinary people. But the entire Blue Star entered an era where martial strength was everything. And if you were a weak human, you were considered inferior. Only martial arts cultivators were above all. While he was thinking about the nightmare that would be happening in the future, he thinks, he sees something new emerging. This was the world crossing that was being introduced. The host that would have the system for the rest of his life was our IE, and stops to pepper in the head of our protagonist some memories. If he is a student in the medical school, why all this? However, while all this was happening, the extras on the side realized that our protagonist, who at the moment is considered trash, was having some kind of nightmare. Even more, they start to laugh in his face, wondering why a loser like him still takes the entrance exam. Not only satisfied with making fun of him there, this girl appears and asks him to drop out of school because he was the loser and go back to being a common worker and die working. But the truth is that every story here has a protagonist who was always mistreated. There is always this type of woman who is always in the middle of the story to be getting in the way of the protagonist's story. However, he ignores this because the original owner of this body didn't have a good reputation in the class. Why? His original parents ended up having an accident last year, which made him lose focus on his training and on his studies. His grades were previously quite decent, but now they have practically plummeted, which became, in the end, basically a weight on his class average. So, at this moment, he wonders what happened, all because the protagonist stared at her for a long time, until at the moment, she thinks he wanted to be fighting. However, she thinks a little there that he didn't study properly, but it's very likely that he was the only one here who was suffering here right now. And at the moment, then, he thinks that he ended up kind of inheriting a rather unpopular life. And what's more, he ended up stopping at a humiliating and quite tragic moment, but the professor appears and asks them to relax, because now they will be receiving that serum in order to be able to awaken their genetics, and even the professor gives negative motivation so that no one has that high confidence, because after injecting the serum, their 3 years of effort and building their physique and their spiritual energy training will practically be almost useless or useful until then. but everything they did so far was essential so that they could be awakening the serum. And then, he ends up holding it in the office and comments that while those who did not take anything seriously before, will have practically nothing, however. This seems to him to be a kind of joke, and it also seems that it seems that he perhaps was not the only relaxed here, but now he needs to take control of the panic because at that moment, he thought only of panicking because he did not want to have another shame to be unlocking in his mind. But in any case, he won't be afraid, because today he will basically still be inheriting the main role and will awaken the power of a serum, and will also be doing everything right to clean up his mess. While the protagonist and everyone else are happy about this, the scene changes to another location. In this location, we find all the students wondering what kind of animal they would transform into. One even thought he would transform into a mountain crusher, or maybe a dragon, but like the good friend Kara R, he only says that his friend will awaken as a level 1 beast. And so after a while, the genetics end up sprouting there in the middle of the courtyard. And the moment it came out, we found several genetics there that they could be taking and using, since this was also the genetic awakening serum. It also contains the primordial genes of all the magical beasts ever recorded by the human warriors. After the injection, you will be absorbed into it, and randomly, you will be awakening. Normally, the stronger your physique, the stronger your gene will be able to awaken. So, the professor continues to say that, so that they wouldn't get nervous, as soon as the serum was injected, they just had to stay there calmly, accepting the power coming to them. Those whose names were called were supposed to be going up on stage. So he called Shang Peng, and soon after, the other one, Mao Runo. And so the injection ends up injecting them. While he was taking that serum and awakening his powers, the auras rose between them, but our protagonist was just there in the background, watching all this. The next moment, he finds it a little strange, the way they were acting. He even thinks it's going to be difficult. So, he ends up ignoring it. He simply takes that needle he was holding and goes towards his neck. As soon as he gets closer, he ends up injecting it into him. And the moment he injects it, a blue liquid enters him. And only after it enters, our protagonist widens his eyes, and he comes face to face with the professor. Soon after, the professor realizes that Rier doesn't seem to have changed much. Then he even thinks that maybe he received a fake dose. But that girl from before appears, mocking him, calling for Rier. As always, Yi was a failure and couldn't awaken anything. So she continues to mock him, because he was a bird that, in her vision, woke up without wings. What? What did that mean? That he was doomed? He realizes the next moment that this girl was annoying. Until now, she was the one who led the bullies against our hero. However, she continues to say there that all this suits our hero. Now that he will no longer be a warrior, she only asks him to leave and go home. However, thinking that everything is over, he feels a sensation coming. The system appears, showing his status. Knowing that he managed to awaken an extremely strong beast, he only asks her to leave, but she, on the other hand, ends up wondering what he wanted to say with that. What was he awakening? The guy was the weakest of them all. And what's more, all because they should be leaving here. But it was too late, because now our hero has awakened his power. And at that moment, a shadow of a gigantic Godzilla appears there. And that little shadow there ended up showing a little bit of power. That little power made that girl who was near our hero fly back a little. Not only was she thrown back, but so were the rest of the students, who soon fell to the ground and wondered who had awakened this shocking power. The boy's aura was so powerful that they couldn't even stand up. While they couldn't, the scene changes to another location, and we find this girl controlling her pet beast, while looking at our hero. On the other hand, the other one who had an ice pet beast looked at him and realized that that power was different. While he commented that things were different, the system appears commenting that the model he had just awakened was rank A, Amola's insane flame. Its bloodline skill is incendiary breath. Looking at this thing in the system, he doesn't believe it. A rank A monster? He was surprised by this. And at this point, looking at the palm of his hand, he realizes that he received the golden finger. The one who was the loser, Rier, has now become extremely powerful. And not only that, but he also used his aura to throw his companions back a little. Even that Yang ended up being knocked out with a single blow from our protagonist's beast, and bet we found her completely unconscious. So they wondered what kind of model he had awakened. However, they couldn't just stand by now. They kneel down and start apologizing. However, our protagonist ends up commenting that he ended up causing a huge mess here just now. But before causing this mess, he ended up commenting so that he would look away. So if by chance he didn't listen, it wasn't his fault. And now that they've awakened their genes, this guy ends up inviting them to follow him into a room. In this place where they'll be following, they're supposed to be finding out what type of monster you are, as well as the strength of your awakened monster. Since in order to discover your real power and your pet's strength, they'll be using gene advancement detection. He might be testing your guy's magical beast gene, and he might also be testing his martial level. While everyone was talking about this, another person was commenting that Shiozu really lived up to his title, best student in the class. And not only is he a 9th-level martial apprentice, he has also awakened the top-level bloodline of the 3rd-level Ice Dragon bloodline. And this time, the champion of Ancheng City has to be him. However, another person also appears there, commenting that another person has also ended up awakening an extremely high ranking. She then even comments to herself that a rare 4th-level Netherworld Sparrow is practically considered the highest score in the province. If a level 4 bloodline beast appears in front of him, its true form could practically destroy most of the city. And the warriors like now, who are quite weak, they can't even deal with a monster like that. Only a Grandmaster could resist such a monster like that. However, our protagonist, on the other hand, realizes that their awakening models are either level 3 or level 4. However, he wonders why his is A. At this moment, the girl in the background calls out to our Rie. However, he thinks it was too early until he looks back and finds the gigantic amount of his companions staring at him, as they think that our protagonist could be the new revolutionizer of powerful guys who will emerge now. However, he ignores everything and just goes ahead there. And one thing is certain, he understands that this world only revolves around martial power. They then, seeing him enter, seeing our hero enter, realize that he will be the greatest student of this era. That aura there would also transform him into an extremely strong monster. So they make way for number 1 to enter. He, who was curious to know who had that strong aura, finds out his name. This might be Rier. He was really worth waiting to see what power he would be awakening. Then, on the screen, our protagonist appears. It showed some basic class information that he was class 7. Rie, the martial disciple stage level 3. However, his beast lineage was unknown. But seeing level 3 lineage, everyone who was there laughed in his face. And unknown lineage, maybe he doesn't even have a beast. It could be shame, disappointment. But everything that happened before, maybe it was even a joke that happened. However, our protagonist leaves in the end. This expectation was not so high, especially because the model was not detected, but he ended up announcing a prompt for a model of an infinite monster. But the infinite monster model is practically an improvement guide, because there you can complete some missions, or also increase your reputation, which you can get some additional monster models. And by completing missions, increasing your reputation, your strength will increase more. His rank and his model here are now different from them, but this means one thing, that he still has a chance. After all, as long as he still meets the conditions, our protagonist can be drawing monster models, basically as much as he wants, infinitely. And with a face and a smile, he then realizes that in the end he will become, maybe or not, he would be the king of the monsters. While he was considering all this, the scene changes to another location. In the teacher's office, They wonder why the protagonist wanted this break so much. He even says there that he wanted this break so he could be improving his power more and more. Then the teacher, for the last time, ends up wondering if he really would stay there at his house studying. So he calls for Araya. He knows a lot about this. If he really wants to become a warrior, the only way is to go to college. And he also knows that he ended up awakening a bloodline, but its function was still very weak. And there is no way for our protagonist to pass the entrance exam. Beijing University is something that was not easy to get into, so he should be preparing a lot. If he fails once, he will have to test several times. However, our hero ignores him. He says that he was desperate to learn. He might not understand, especially since he awakened a powerful bloodline. As long as he can train hard, he will achieve everything he wants, and to tell the truth. He asks him to look into his eyes. His eyes would not lie to our teacher. If that was really what he wanted, the teacher agrees, but if he happens to fail and repeat, he will be making him go back to studying. With him again. But in the city, we find our hero walking. He mentions there that his parents' house was mortgaged for about 600,000 won. And with the compensation from their city, with more than 1 million, he now has enough money to be heading to the main city. But to improve his power now, he has two options. One is to level up as a warrior, but the other way is to increase the contract rate with the Timora model. And according to the data of the infinite monster model, each model then starts with only one accounting point. But Timora clearly has 3 compatibility points. What he doesn't understand, where did the last 2 points come from? And for that, there is only one answer. The Timora model absorbed the power of the genetic awakening serum and gained 2 accounting points. This proves that the serum basically related to the genes in this world may be improving its model abilities. Instead of training to death as a warrior, he could be spending money to increase his compatibility. For him to be, which for him, to be honest, will be much better. So he needed to hurry up and buy some genetic enhancement serum. But when he passes by the card there, our protagonist has a huge surprise. His eyes widen, and in front of him he finds people who were walking. But walking, he notices the presence of his genes. Everyone here has already awakened their lineage. After awakening the flame model, Intense Flame of Mora, our protagonist obtained a unique sensory ability, the magnetic field of life. Since Timora may be sensing vital signs emitted by creatures through the release of his vital magnetic field, he may be clearly feeling the chi and blood of the warriors burning them, as if it were a furnace inside them. And along with the roars of his beasts, of his lineages, the warriors, the monsters, he can no longer suppress the power to fight within him. But unfortunately, he was just a rookie now. Only at the moment he might be suppressing the Timora fighter lineage for now. When he gets stronger, he will show the whole world the meaning of his king of beasts. However, a girl appears behind him and calls out to him. And the next moment, she asks him not to stare at her so much without at least disguising himself. However, she ignores everything. She only came here to buy some genetic medicine, but this place was huge, and she ended up getting lost. She asks our protagonist for help, but she also realizes that he has just awakened his genes, and it is very likely that he was not able to control his powers, which is normal now. But she asks what our protagonist was doing here at the Warrior Center. He tells her what he wanted, it surprises her a lot. But his real reason for being here was to buy some genetic medicines. She, on the other hand, ends up thinking that these things were not cheap. It means that he will have to spend a lot of money to have just a simple genetic medicine. But even if he wants to maximize the effects, warriors usually wait for their bloodline to at least reach a bottleneck level before using it. But he asks how much it would cost to buy something like that, to which she ends up saying that at the moment here, they were at a very low level. Even at that level, he will have to shell out about 400,000 yen. Then he gets scared by the price, because that was expensive. His savings would almost all go away. Now, looking at this, he wouldn't even be able to buy 5 portions like that. However, he knew he would buy it, but he wanted an extra discount, so he asks her where he could find one. She, who is a good person, ends up giving our protagonist a business card, which means it's a recommendation from a veteran warrior, so he could get a really good discount. And after he gets the card, he ends up thanking her for it. And only then does he end up leaving, but she ends up commenting that fate, very likely, will make them meet again. And as soon as he says goodbye to her, our protagonist moves on. But now it's time to get everything he wants, to get those little upgrades. And first he goes to the bank, and there he ends up getting the good amount of money he had. With the money in hand, he first buys a gun. This gun was already expensive, but after some insane spending, our hero unfortunately has it all. But our scene changes to night. In a very, very, very poorly located house, we find our protagonist in his room doing those upgrades. He takes those injections and injects them into himself. However, that was almost taking control of our protagonist. But now, he has achieved what he wanted so much. He has leveled up a few levels, from 8 to level 10. However, he realizes that leveling up seems too incredible. However, with each genetic dose he takes, his physique improves a little. But last time, it only increased. But from last time to now, it only increased a little. But it seems that as his body gets stronger, the basic mutation will become increasingly difficult to trigger. But for him, it wasn't bad at all. In a few minutes, he managed to achieve what others would take 3 or 4 years to achieve. This was all thanks to him for using those physical and basic strategies of his. If he can activate the power of Diamond's bloodline, perhaps he will have the chance to be the first to be placed in the school exam he will be participating in the next few days. But if the cheating model cannot defeat the geniuses, then this cheating seems too weak for him. But for now, he needed to go to the strongest realm, to the secret realm. The secret kingdom are places where monsters are not classified as S or R rank. They themselves have a much stronger classification than that. The beasts in the kingdom there are S class, which for them are completely uncontrollable by humans. And if one day these monsters there decide to invade the human world, that would be an apocalyptic disaster. While telling this beautiful story, the scene changes to another location. There, he realizes that there are much fewer people here than he expected. Maybe it's because the secret realm was developed very recently. After all, it is a kingdom. It is an ancient kingdom. And any treasures he had there have basically already been taken. Only a few weak beasts were left behind for the novice warriors to go there to train. Knowing this, he goes to this guy there and ends up buying a ticket so he can enter the secret realm. He just asks him to sign here so that they would not be responsible for the boy's death. So, he ends up signing, and only after signing does he move on. And moving forward, he comes face to face with a gigantic blue portal. Our protagonist stops there and only then smiles, since now here, this will be his first step towards becoming the king of the beasts. Then he jumps and says that here he goes. He then enters the portal, and the moment he enters the portal, the scene changes to another dimension. In this dimension, he lands. In this dimension, he can see several stars, the Konga star, the Anyway star, and also the Taijin star. In the new dimension, he is surprised, because the appearance he saw in the books was completely different now, seeing it here in person. This was incredible to him. Even too much. He can even see the stars. However, while he was walking happily around, he ends up being followed by a mutant rabbit, and as soon as he was followed by it, the system appears showing that this is the first beast of the first echelon, the Blade Fang Rabbit. The Blade Fang Rabbit doesn't miss an opportunity. It advances towards our protagonist. He activates his spears to catch it, to catch our protagonist off guard. But that's probably what he thought, because our hero quickly turns around. He even makes fun of the rabbit's face for thinking he would catch him from behind. The magnetic field model's ability saved our protagonist's life. So after he caught the rabbit, he simply crushes it with a simple movement of his hand. And with that, ends up getting the magic rabbit's core. He realizes that its core was white, of average quality, and was probably worth around a few thousand yuan. But if he earns 1,000 yuan just minutes after entering this dungeon, that would be quite effective, because ordinary people would kill themselves to work all month to earn just that here. But just collecting beast cores, low-level beasts, wouldn't be entirely useful. It would be better to find some other stronger monsters. And thinking about that, one of the monsters appears back there. It looks like a giant snake, and this thing ends up catching our protagonist's attention. Then, the thing he wanted so much ends up happening. The monster he wanted so much appears. With the appearance of this mutant snake, he ends up drawing his sword. And from the same dimension, we still find the eye of a more than dangerous monster. However, while this monster was in this situation, in another place, we find our hero with his sword drawn now, facing this monster. With a simple movement, our protagonist managed to strike this monster. While he was doing this, he ended up reading in some monster encyclopedia that it ends up being compared to its steel shell on its back, and the magical armor on the abdomen of the corpse demon monster insect is obviously more difficult to break or cause any kind of injury to the monster like him. And saying this, the monster ends up turning around and heading towards our protagonist. However, to finish off a monster like this, he will need to use martial arts techniques. So, he makes some movements, and then a type of ki appears in his hand. It's like a kamehameha, and he throws that blow at this monster. The monster ends up getting caught by it, being thrown back a little. However, everything he thought he had finished ends up, kind of in the end, becoming a nightmare, because he managed to perform a miracle. He managed to throw its jaws in its direction, as if they were projectiles. And of course, he saw this thing approaching. So, as not to be caught by this, our protagonist quickly dodges to the side. Those two things pass by him. However, even so, he managed to tear our hero's clothes, making him angry. However, his current level of martial arts, he doesn't even have a way to deal with a monster like that. And to do that, he needed to unlock some deep dantan. However, his strength was so weak that he can't even put out 50% of his true strength. Why? The original body of this body here, which he reincarnated, was a complete failure. So, unfortunately, fighting hand-to-hand and fair here was unfair, so he would have to do those cheats there. To do that, he ends up activating those crazy tricks. He activates the Furious Demon. His eyes end up kind of releasing a little bit of aura, and only then our protagonist activates his Godzilla. His hand ends up transforming into one of its paws. At that moment, an aura emerges from his hand. He knew that now would be enough. But the insect opens its mouth, and only after it opens its mouth, it tries to devour our protagonist. But whoever is fast in this game gets the joke, and our protagonist is faster. He manages to jump and goes towards the monster's mouth. However, with a simple movement, he manages to destroy this monster from the inside and out. He manages to get through it, and after he gets through the monster, we see him from the outside, coming out intact, and he still manages to destroy the monster. Now that his overall physique has gone up to level 21 and completely crushed the level 2 corpse demon insect like this, the short sword he ended up, kind of, buying was corroded by the corpse demon insect's poison. After deactivating his transformation, he must still be expelling the heat from his body, which made our protagonist feel like he was a turbine. On the ground, he sees the $250,000 weapon, which didn't even help him deal with a level 2 monster. He realizes that the blow is there. He falls. And the quality control of that was terrible. The evaluation of that was bad. But then he wonders if he had consumed enough energy for his first hunt, because after the fight, he felt a little more hungry. And to make matters worse, he didn't even bring back a single piece of food. But the next moment, he smells something coming from another direction. The smell seemed like a sweet perfume, and then he finds it. This was a magic core. The core of a green-grade corpse demon insect. It even seemed to give off a tempting aroma, but who cares? He then takes that crystal he had just found and ends up putting it in his mouth. After putting it in his mouth, he ends up swallowing it. And after entering our protagonist, that crystal ends up transforming into a few points, making his compatibility increase from 7% to 7.3%. He is happy with these small increases, but this makes him quite happy because he had previously spent hundreds, thousands of genetic portions. This only increased his compatibility by 1%, but this green magic core here increased his compatibility by 0.3%. Taking that there, he would need to take 3 or 4 needles to reach that level. Now that he has seen all this, he realizes that he wasted a lot of money buying those things. He even cries about it. Knowing that he was dissatisfied with it, he needs to turn this into satisfaction. He would be hunting until he felt satisfied. So to do this, he will be activating the life field, which ends up detecting if there are monsters nearby. After a few hours, his compatibility ended up increasing to 9. His overall physique increased to 15.8, and after reaching 9% compatibility, he is happy, especially because he consumed countless white magic cores, which at the moment will no longer be increasing anything else for him. Knowing that this will not increase any more of his compatibility, he will have to sell these cores now. And now, at the moment, he has a total of 20 white magic cores and 1 green magic core. So, he goes to the stand there and ends up putting them in, which leaves this girl completely surprised. She ends up not believing, because a simple student managed to collect so many magic cores, since, according to the regulations of some governments out there, martial artists must be handing over 1/10 of their loot to them. So, for the green magic core, he must be handing them 5 white ones. By doing this, he will be able to receive perhaps around 200,000 credits from the Xiaoman Kingdom. In the meantime, he leaves. However, there are 9 days left until the entrance exam. Meanwhile, in the completely blue portal, we find some people, one of whom is called Captain Leon. And he, at that moment, comments that they should be able to complete the Jade Flower mission, since, during their exploration, they managed to find and locate the general of the Bloody Jade Flower. However, Old Shen ended up kind of being injured by some monsters, so he can no longer be joining them to be able to enter the secret realm this time. However, there is a rule here, that at least to enter this dungeon here, it was necessary to have 1 more on the team. To enter the D-rank secret realm, it was necessary to have 5. However, he said that he didn't need to worry, because he had contacted the martial arts agency there and ended up sort of asking them to introduce a student to him. He mentioned there, pointing back, that this was a level 2 martial artist, Leon. Looking at this person, it means that there are now 5 people in the team. He picked his nose and said that he was still a student who hadn't yet qualified to enter the D-class secret realm. So he had to use some illegal agencies to create some fake identity and join their team. However, to join, he had to spend 100,000 credits, which he thought was a bit too much of a rip-off. But saying our protagonist's name, he found his name a bit too strange. He then said that if he happened to choose this name and was using his original name, it would be violating some copyright. At first he was worried about his name, but he asked them to forget it. So with his level 9 martial disciple strength, he shouldn't be able to qualify for a D-rank secret realm. However, his team is only allowing him to observe and learn a bit. Understanding that he needs to do this, they end up retreating, and only after that do they end up entering the portal. Because now their goal is to find that Blood Jade Flower. Since, according to the tracker, the Bloody Jade Flower is in an oasis a little further ahead. So, with the car, they enter this dimension. Inside the dimension, they ran. While he was running there, with the smoke behind him, he comments there that the last time it was the rainforest, now a desert. It seems that the secret realm was not basically connected to just one world. However, while he was running, some of them ended up realizing that there were some earth demon rats. They were running very fast, and these monsters could possibly be catching them. Understanding that he needed to eliminate them, he ends up taking some of his daggers and putting them in his hand. After putting that on and gathering some martial arts aura, he quickly throws it back. And those daggers that were thrown back end up catching those rats. And at the point that it got caught in the rats, it ends up exploding. And as soon as it exploded, they continue forward more and more. Knowing that he has been eliminated, our hero realizes that he has fused some martial arts energy into those daggers of his, which he ended up throwing much faster and ended up exploding in the monsters' faces. He looks at him and realizes that the guy was relentless and, what's more, that he didn't talk much. However, the scene changes to another location, in a kind of desert, but very far away. They end up arriving at an oasis. The whole team was walking there, and in the background, our protagonist was walking too. However, now, they asked why he wasn't driving, still some distance from the oasis. To this, he ends up answering that the monsters here are extremely sensitive to the sound of engines or any kind of thing. And to this end, he will be distributing some tasks while he was walking. Xiaojian will be throwing some stun grenades just a little later so that he can attract those beasts. Next, Xiaohu and Road, these, basically, could be preparing some traps. And old Lu will be providing him with some suppressive fire. And now our protagonist, well, he doesn't know what needs to be done for him. So he just asks him to stay there and watch, to take care of the front line. He agrees to this, and after he agrees, they then start their games to attract the monster's attention. They throw some firecrackers into the air, and after a few minutes, they end up exploding, attracting the attention of some of the monsters. This little bomb that they threw causes something to happen to the monsters. This is practically a kind of threat, and the monsters understand it as if it were some other monsters trying to invade their territories. And as soon as he talks about it, the level 2 monster, Earth Dragon, gets up. So, they call the newbie and ask him to be careful, because the monster is coming. While all this is happening, a mysterious shadow of an unknown guy appears there from afar. And this person ends up picking up the dagger that was on the ground. Then, he simply decides to lick it, and after he licks it, he just starts laughing in their faces, out of nowhere, right there. And now the question remains, who could this mysterious guy be? Unfortunately, we'll find out all of this in the next part, because today's video is almost over. But before I go, leave your thoughts on this new manhwa below. So, are you enjoying it? Do you want me to bring you more sequels? I'll leave that question to you. But before I go, leave your like below. And also, if possible, subscribe to our channel. But for now, I think I'll go from there. Maybe I'll see you there, or maybe I'll see you in the next part.